You are listening to The Catholic Wire.
Hello and welcome to The Catholic Wire. This is your host, Father Carlos Cepeda. Every now and then you will have those theologians online that will be creating blog posts or creating even websites where they argue with priests and bishops sometimes about issues of moral theology and canon law. Now, I won't condemn all of that, en masse, but I would say that there's a right way to do it. There is a right way, I would say, to ask the bishops and the priests for confirmation of their doctrines. And there's a wrong way to do it, which is disrespectful, rash, and not only that, very, very harmful to the faith of lay people sometimes. So today I figure a good way to perhaps give a little bit of light into this topic is to go over some of the things that priests cover in their seminary. So we will begin by saying, obviously, when you go to the seminary, you have to go to year number 1 and year number 2 of Latin, something like that. You will have sometimes another couple books of Latin grammar, Latin exercises, and then you will have maybe a book or two of Greek. In some places they study Hebrew. I don't think in my seminary we do usually, not at least in depth. So after you've studied a little bit of languages, you will have the beginnings of philosophy. You'll have a book of Introduction to Philosophy. You'll have a book of Criteriology. You'll have a book or two of Apologetics and Defense of the Church. You have a couple of books of Ontology. You will have a book of Theodicy as well. Maybe a book covering the Summa Theologica of St. Thomas Aquinas, which I would put here, but it wouldn't fit probably. So that is just a few of the books that you cover of philosophy. To understand theology and to understand a lot of canon law even, you need to know the basics of philosophy. And if you don't know that, you really don't grasp the concepts of dogmatic theology or moral theology as you should, because it's all based on these concepts. So once you've studied that in a couple years of the seminary, you will start studying dogmatic theology, which you're going to have some books introducing you to that. These are the books that we study in the first couple years of the seminary. You will study the sacraments, a little bit of other basic concepts of dogmatic theology, maybe the sources of Catholic dogma. You will study another 14 books of dogmatic theology, which I actually don't have here with me right now. I didn't get all of them, but Mariology, Soteriology, meaning the doctrine of salvation, Christology, God as Creator, God as Redeemer, the Divine Trinity, Eschatology, God, His attributes, His knowledge, His essence. There's 14 of these books. I'm missing some of them right now. But so this would be what you study of dogmatic theology and some other books in here. After that, you might study some issues of spirituality, like the books of Tanqueray, Doctrine and Devotion, the Spiritual Life. You will study probably Arintero or some other authors of spiritual life, such as St. John of the Cross. You might study one or two books of the history of the Church. I'm just putting one right now. Besides that, in most seminaries, you will have to study the encyclicals of the popes. So these ones are right new because I just brought them to the seminary. And of course, you only study the encyclicals of the popes up until 1958. That's Pope Pius XII. You might study a couple books of liturgy, matters liturgical, the Book of Ceremonies by O'Connell. You would have the celebration of the Mass too, which I'm lacking here. You would also have the Administration of the Sacraments, at least one book of the Administration of the Sacraments, which I'm lacking here. Another book of Catholic liturgy. More often than not, I hope these don't fall here. Well, the other essential part is going to be moral theology, where you will have 4 books of moral theology, at least for a textbook. That would be Davis that we use in here sometimes. But if you're going to study moral theology, let's make room here. There we go. That way it won't fall, hopefully. If you're going to be serious about moral theology, though, you'll have to study some books in Latin. So, for example, here we have Nolden Smith. And these are 3 volumes. But obviously, to really know moral theology, you have to see more than one author. There are some things that are treated here that will not be treated here, and vice versa. Not only that, in some aspects, you will have some things that are treated here that this author gives you a different option. But with dogmatic theology, of course, you have a problem because you also need a special medical moral theology. You will need some special questions. Pastoral theology as well, because the principles does not suffice. You need to know how that applies in the pastoral life. But you might study moral theology and realize that you are not applying the principles correctly. So it is necessary that you study cases of moral theology. The most basic collection here is going to have at least 4 books of cases of moral theology. That's casuistic. And you would think we're done, but I hope this doesn't collapse on me. We still need to go... Oh, I forgot some books of philosophy. So we have sociology here. We do study that in the seminary, of course. Dialectics and psychology. There you go. Now, next comes canon law. Canon law, here in the seminary, we cover at least 2 books. That's Puscarian and Cicognani. I'm lacking Cicognani, but as I say, in every good seminary, you're going to have at least 2 different authors. So here we have one and the other. The problem, though, is canon law, just like moral theology, you might know some of the principles, but then you need to know the particular application of them. Now, the most complicated part of canon law is going to be matrimony. For matrimony, you have obviously your textbooks, but you also need to look into the particular application of those principles, and you see that by looking at the canonical procedure in matrimonial cases, of which you have 2 volumes, and without which you really cannot understand how the Holy See used to work with matrimonial cases. But here's a problem too. You might look at your textbook of canon law and you might think, okay, well, I have it figured out. I memorized all of them. I know the numbers. The problem is the Holy See has made different applications of those canons. Sometimes those applications have been different. Not only that, the Holy See has issued decrees reforming those canons way after the Code of Canon Law. The Code of Canon Law was, remember, promulgated in 1917. There were reforms all the way up until 1956 that I'm aware of, and I'm sure there were some later, and some quite important ones. There is a particular reform that if you don't know it, you won't know that a marriage case is valid or invalid. So for that, you need to know the Canon Law Digest, or at least read it, or at least have it available, so that you can see all the resolutions that the Holy See has issued in the past, which would change or could change canon law. And so the Canon Law Digest is going to have 6 volumes, which will allow you to know what the current legislation is in these issues. Now, the problem here is we're not done. Besides this, you also have to study sacred scripture, because you have to know that all of these doctrines are based on revelation. Now, for sacred scripture, of course, you're going to read the Bible. But as you, as a good Catholic, know, the Bible is not enough. You need to know commentaries. And for the commentary, the best one is a Lapide, which we cover here in the seminary. The Gospels alone is 4 volumes, but obviously the Bible is not Gospels alone. So you're going to have the 4 volumes of the Gospel at least. And then around other 4 volumes for the New Testament, the Epistles, the Apocalypse. Some of these are not available in English, so you have to study them in Latin. Now, this might be all the books that I have right now here, but I know that we have some missing that we actually do have in the seminary and we do study. The point to be made then is that Not everyone has this knowledge, and issues that are complicated in moral theology and canon law require you to know many things. Not only that, you might read all these books, but you still need years of spiritual training in the seminary. You still need years of reading spiritual books of the saints so that you know how these principles were applied. You need to read spiritual works of the saints so that you see how the doctrines of the church were understood by other people. And after that, as a priest, you acquire knowledge that is impossible to acquire otherwise, where people reveal their consciences to you. I'm speaking, of course, outside of the confessional, where people ask for advice to you, where you see many different cases of many different families. And so this requires you to, or this allows you to acquire knowledge that no one else has access to. Does that mean that you should never question a priest, or that you should never argue with a priest? That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that we should do it respectfully. I think the proper way to act, if a priest tells me something that I don't agree with, or if a bishop or a priest says something that I think is wrong, is to say respectfully, Your Excellency or Father, can you tell me where the church teaches that? Can you tell me where are you basing yourself on to give me this doctrine, or to make this decision? I think that is fair, considering all the things that we have suffered from the betrayal of priests and bishops in these times. But that can be done, as I say, respectfully, and I think that's very legitimate. On the other hand, attacking a priest or a bishop and pretending to know canon law or matrimonial cases or dogmatic theology because you have read maybe this book over here or that book over there, seems to me, as you can see, a little bit rash. So let's try to be humble about it. Obviously, we're not boasting here. I'm just showing you precisely the kind of things that we see here in the seminary. And I think that after this, we can try to appreciate the work that the priests and the bishops do for us, try to be very respectful. And obviously, this can also be an inspiration for us to be more acquainted with our faith. This is Carlos Cepeda for the Catholic Wire. God bless you.